Okay, here I am on the laser engraver driving machine, the PC in our lab. What I'm gonna do is open up Corel Draw. It has a little green icon that says Corel Draw 8. I'll open this up. I've already inserted my flash drive into the computer. So what I can do is when this comes up, you're going to get a document that is sized to the exact size of the cutting bed, which is 12 inches in height by 24 inches in width. So you have to import your artwork into that. So I'll run a file import. And I'm going to grab my Illustrator file, which I set up for a half sheet to line up for cutting. So I'll import that. And when I drop it in, what happens is Corel just basically snaps the document size to any artwork that you had. And in my case, it's just the head that I had set up for cutting. So you may need to do a little rotating, or you can pre-rotate your documents in Illustrator. In my case, I get a rotate option. It's just going to show up above. So you're going to have to do a little bit of playing and figuring things out in Corel Draw. But other than rotating and moving things around, you shouldn't have to do a lot of work if you did your layout correctly in Illustrator or other software that you've used to set up the die lines. So I'll set this up with a 90-degree counterclockwise rotation. That's going to set sort of the head cutout to be orientation that I want, but the problem that I have is it needs to also be in the position that I want. So what I'm going to do is place the actual trim document, the document for die cutting, onto the cutter bed, and I'm going to measure out where the head is at approximately so that I can then set up my cut lines. So what you'll need to do is pick a point in your die line for reference where you want to place some guides. So my example would be, I'm going to just drag a guide. So this is much like Illustrator. You click into the rulers or InDesign, any Adobe software, and you can drag out guides. And I'm going to choose a reference point for my guides. Now what some people will do and is useful is you could actually take and make a little X pattern that you could put outside of your guide and use the X as the reference, so it would cut that and then you would turn that off or delete that X ahead of actual cutting. In my case, I'm just going to pick a recognizable point. So I picked this spot right here. This is the tip of the hat. There's sort of a little knob on the top of my hat. And before I get there, I'd like to point out that I am actually using the version that has the black cutout on it. So I've left this outline in place for a guide. I'll cut this one until I get it right, and then I'm going to load a clean, unmarked piece because I don't want to see that on the cutting. So with it loaded in the bed, before I actually cut, I picked that point in my design as a reference. And again, some people make little X's. That can be really useful to make yourself sort of a registration mark to cut out first. You get that right, then delete it, and everything else should be in position. Anyhow, I just measured over and I tried to figure out where that cap was. So that's how I came to that number of just about 10 3/4 being the tip of the cap. And then I went about 2.5 inches down when I measured. If I select this guide and then go up to the X position in the software, which is way up in the top left in this one, I can dial it in directly. So 10.75, I'll hit return, and there my guide's gonna snap over, so I can then align my head with that guide. But I have to also have a Y position guide as well. So I measured down, and if I measure down from the top of the bed, like this, I ended up figuring out it was, a little over 2 inches down or so in the Y position. So with those measurements in place, what I'm going to do is pick my point that I wanted to align to. Again, with my measurements, I measured to the tip of the cap, so I'm going to align sort of the cap with that position. Essentially, this will then be ready to cut. So in order to do that, you just run a file print from the main menu. It's going to bring a dialog box up with several options that you can take a look at. But the VL300 should be selected. That is our cutter. I'm going to hit print. When the VL300 dialog box comes up, there are many options you can work with. I've chosen the paper and paperboard setting. I'm going to take the matte board setting. As I am working with a heavier stock, matte board seems to work well for heavier stock papers. You have to enter a thickness And that is set up in inches. There are ways to measure that thickness, which we will talk about in class, but in general, for this 80-pound stock, I found 0.025 to be the appropriate thickness, and I can hit print. After this point, the file's ready to go over. As you can see, the bed of the cutter is exactly the size of that document, that 18 by 24. So with that set, we'll fire this up and we'll go ahead and actually run a cut and see how it looks. So you have to keep in mind that the machine was basically already sent the data the second that I hit file print. If not, I could send it again. What you want to make sure is that it's been set prior to hitting the start button. Now I've hit that already, so. Let's see how it looked. All right. If I go through and pull it out, oh, there's our cut. Not too perfect. As you can see, it is off. So what I'm going to do is just measure the distance that it's actually off. So if I take a look, the cut is just about 1/4 inch too low. It's also off to the right. A small amount. Actually, it's not too bad off to the right. It's pretty good. Maybe 1/8 of an inch. So I need to make these adjustments so that it cuts correctly. All right, this looks pretty good. If I take a look at it, I can go in now, I can see maybe the tiniest amount of the black line edge, but you got to keep in mind when I designed this, I built in about 1/8 of an inch sort of bleed manually into the cut. So I should have a little bit of forgiveness room to the back side. The big goal is that after folding, my face ends up coming through perfect to the backside. That's what I want to end up seeing. So with my marked copy registering for the cut, I've decided to go and load a clean copy for cutting. Let's send the design again. All right, time to take a look. Okay, the cut looks clean. And then the goal would of course be that after fold, it should look clean as well. And this does appear to look clean. There we have it, example concept to completion. Basically all I would need to do is run these cuts for all the rest of my examples. Then go ahead and do some scoring on these and then take them to the trimmer and trim them all at once on all 4 sides, and we have a completed product ready to go.